Jenny. Okay, well, I'm excited to be here, and I am going to screen share and kind of start my slides. Uh, and I'll share a little bit about myself, my background, before sharing all sort of my lessons in my 22 years in tech, 16 years of it in product leadership roles, about 4 years in VC, and then the last couple of years as the sort of CXO, COO of my last startup that I joined. So let me just, okay, there. Oh, so a little bit about myself. So I, after graduation from business school, I decided that I was going to move out to California. I was in school at HBS. I was going to move out to California and be part of the Web 1.0 sort of tech boom. And I was really fortunate that I got a career, my first job at eBay. And so I started as one of the first 5 or 6 product managers that eBay ever hired. And it was a phenomenal experience. The company went from 120 people when I joined to 7,000 by the time I left. But one of the things I realized about myself being at eBay was that I loved the early stage. So I love the early stage everything: product building, team building, culture building, company building. So I decided to leave eBay in 2005 and join a startup to just sort of have more sort of impact and sort of feel like I was involved in sort of the creation and the building of something. My journey from there was about 10 years in VP product leadership roles at not only that one startup that I joined after eBay, but 3 other sort of Series A startups. And I always found that after a company sort of got to sort of Series C, like that was when I was feeling antsy again, that I needed to leave and kind of like go back and do it all early again. So that was kind of my product leadership career. And then in 2015, I wanted to do something very different. I'd done 16 years in product leadership roles and wanted to try out something different. I was talking to lots of people, and an old boss from my eBay days invited me to join her at her venture capital firm. And so I did venture capital for about 5 years, investing in various tech startups. And, that was so fun. So I don't spend a lot of time talking about VC in this particular talk, but it was a great way to just sort of see what it was like on the other side, not just building companies, but investing in companies as well. And then in 2020, sort of this crazy thing happened. It was the pandemic. I was doing 5 to 7 Zoom pitches a day, listening to different founders who were like looking to raise money, listening to their stories. And in the fall of 2020, the Swimply founders pitched to me. And for those of you who may not be familiar with Swimply, think about it as the Airbnb of swimming pools. So they allow homeowners with swimming pools to rent out their swimming pools to their neighbors and by the hour. So unlike Airbnb, where it's like an overnight rental, Swimply, you can rent somebody's pool for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and it's a private experience with just friends and family. Completely blew up during the pandemic. People were locked up at home, wanted to get outside and do something COVID safe. And so that summer, the founders who had just started or launched the company like hit lightning in a bottle, and they did about 5.5 million in bookings with just the 2 of them. All of the tech outsourced to the Ukraine, and 3 part-time college kids running customer service. So they decided, but with all that success and product market fit, they were going to go raise some VC. They pitched to me, completely fell in love with the company. Thought that a lot of the story reminded me of my early days at eBay. So not only did I have the conviction to want to invest in them, but the craziest thing happened. They asked me to join them, and I did. So I left my cushy VC job, took a 50% pay cut, and joined as like their first employee. And I was essentially the COO of the company. My title was Chief Experiences Officer because one of the co-founders had the COO title, but I ended up running all of our operations, customer service, trust and safety, concierge, our supply efforts, supply acquisition, optimization, and our host community efforts, and also the HR people function. So essentially, I wanted to just do something different than product, and so I owned a bunch of functions I had never done before, and I had a great time. I'm currently on sabbatical, and during the talk, I'll share a little bit more about my sabbatical and what I'm up to. But I thought I would share a bunch of lessons that I've learned throughout my 22 years in tech. And so I have like 12 stories vignettes and lessons for you, and each one of them also has a success metric behind it. So, love to share. So the first one was, and this was sort of very early in my career, like learning how to find my voice. And I will credit HBS, Harvard Business School, for really helping me develop my voice. So I consider myself an introvert. A lot of people don't believe me, but I am an introvert. And so I did not like talking at all. But at Harvard Business School, like class participation is 50% of your grade, and they cold called people. So you had to be prepared, and I was terrified every day of being cold called, and so it forced me to just know the case inside and out, know the numbers, be prepared for that cold call. And it forced me to also learn how to use my voice and speak up. Even if I didn't have that much to say, I needed to articulate sort of some persuasive arguments for my classmates, and my classmates were very intimidating. But that was sort of the lesson that I carried with me, even into my first tech job, that I was going to find my seat at the table. I was going to be fully prepared. I was going to always have an opinion because I had the data behind me. I knew my customers. I had the data, and I made sure that I would always share an opinion, even if I was not asked. Often, and many of us, I'm sure, have had this experience of being the only woman at the table and men talking sort of over you. And I actually did not allow that to happen. I remember this one time where I actually interrupted someone and I said, "Excuse me, I am talking here." And I promise you that he never interrupted me again. Probably could have said it in a little bit softer way, but I made sure that people listened to what I had to say. And I would say that passion has a lot to do with it too. It's if you're passionate about your product, you're passionate about your customer and solving their problems, people will listen to you, because if you let that passion flow, you'll find a lot of people who are believers and will listen to what you have to say. So the success metric here, if there was a success metric, was actually my performance review. So in those for early years as a PM at eBay, I found myself having sort of scores of 4s and 5s, so exceeding expectations, and that was sort of my success metric. And so that was the first lesson. The second lesson that I learned very, very quickly was to tell my manager what I wanted. So it was after my first year as an eBay PM, and I drummed up the courage to tell my manager, who was Shripriya Mahesh at the time. Some of you may know her. She's in venture capital now. I told her that I wanted to be a manager. So, I wanted to start managing people, because I thought that was how you advance your career. You manage people. Well, interestingly, Shripriya sort of sat me down and said, "You are only 1 year into your PM journey, and while you've had success in your first year, you need to continue to build PM skills. So you are not yet ready for management, but thank you for sharing with us, with me, and I'm going to give you the path to becoming a people manager." And one of the things that she asked me to do, along with another PM who also expressed interest in management, was to create eBay's first ever career path document. And so we kind of did that as our sort of side project of defining all of the different PM levels. And then within a year, I did get promoted to being a manager of PMs. And so my lesson here for all of you is you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. I think if I had not asked her or told her what I wanted, it might have taken 3, 4, 5 years before I ended up managing people. I ended up managing people 2 years out of business school, 2 years into my PM career. And so just got to let people know, tell people what you want, and don't assume, even though Shripriya was an awesome manager, don't assume that somebody else knows what your career goals are. You have to let them know. And then also, it was really helpful for her to tell me that I wasn't ready, and here was all the things that she wanted to see from me, and she wanted me to prove either experience-wise or project-wise. And it's better to sort of know that than to not know that. So I really do think that it would have taken me an extra 2 or 3, 4 years to get that promotion had I not sort of just been very explicit from early on around what I wanted. So the success metric for that was promotion in year 2 of my PM career. Okay, so my third lesson from my career journey is that I've got your back. So what does that mean? So this goes back to my days of like being a very first time manager of PMs. So what had happened was a bunch of peers ended up getting rolled up into me. And now I was managing folks who were formerly my peers. And I was terrified. I had imposter syndrome like crazy, because I was like, okay, I don't know anything about management, and these were my peers. How could I get them to believe in me as a manager? And even though I was sort of terrified, I really sat down to think about like, what was it that was going to make me earn the trust and the respect of my peers as a manager? And it really made me reflect on like, well, what is being a great manager? What would I have wanted from my manager? And the great thing was that I had an awesome role model at the time. My manager had switched from Shripriya Mahesh to Anne Romani, and they were both managers, but I got to like observe what a great manager looked like. And some of the lessons that I took away that I tried to implement every single day was that it was no longer about my success. When you become a people manager, it's about your team success, and knowing and letting them know that you got their back, right? So, it's no longer your job of telling them what to do. You can give them guidance, you can help them remove blockers, you can give them regular feedback, but it's about their success. And so I always thought about like, how could I give both private recognition and public recognition to my team, and make sure that everybody else in the company knew, their successes and what they contributed to the company. And I think that eventually I figured it out. I think how to be a good manager. The success metric that I used was being able to recruit those same PMs again to work for me, no matter what company I went to. And I feel like I had a pretty good success record or track record of that, of just getting PMs that formerly had worked for me at one company to join me in subsequent companies. Okay, so another lesson that I've learned in my career is about building healthy relationships. So the story that I wanted to share here was that first startup that I joined right after eBay. I actually at the time was leading content. So I was the director of content at that startup. At first, I did not get along with the engineering lead for whatever reason, and you could ask him why, but he thought that I was a disaster. And so we kind of like had a very rocky start. But over time, I figured out how to sort of earn his trust and his respect, so much so that a year into it, my CEO asked me to lead up not just content, but all of product. And he asked me 3 times to do it because what he told me was the engineers, liked working with me. They trusted me. They felt like, together we were driving towards outcomes. And I thought it was a big deal to be asked to like lead product at the time, because at the time, one of his co-founders was leading product and sort of had her own team, and I ended up taking over from her. The lesson here was really just like find common ground with everybody that you're working with. So for that head of engineering, I sat down with him, I had coffee with him, I tried to build a personal relationship with him. I asked him what his goals were and how I could help contribute to helping him achieve his goals. And one of the things that I realized is that people actually just want to be acknowledged. They want to be thanked. And that was one of the things that I always made sure that I did, was I made sure that I didn't leave a meeting without thanking somebody for their contributions and, for, everything that they have done to help achieve our project goals or our company goals. And so I always sort of had sort of that attitude of gratitude. Even if, as PMs, we all know, oftentimes we're always having to sort of say no or reprioritize or making somebody unhappy or another. And we have to do that. But to me, sometimes it's just about sort of saying no, but with a smile and being kind, and explaining the rationale. And it goes a long, long way. So early in your career, I think you're looking to build relationships with your engineering partner, but over time, especially as you get to the VP level and the C-suite, that's true of every single department, right? So you're building relationships with marketing and sales and customer success and the head of finance. And so that was sort of one lesson that I learned earlier in my career, is just how to build those healthy relationships. And then the success metric that I used here is like being able to just get things done and get buy-in throughout the organization. And then the other sort of success metric was that even 5, 10, 20 years down the line, if you call them, they will pick up the phone and help you with whatever you need help with. So that's my success metric there. Okay, how are we doing on time? I'm good. We have about 15 more minutes. My next sort of lesson learned in my career is to really find a sponsor who is invested in your success. So right after eBay, the company that I joined was Oodle, and I was really, really lucky. I was reporting into a CEO. His name was Craig Donato, who really just, even though I was still early in my career, like really, really made sure that he gave me the right opportunities. So some of this was, he invited me to every single executive team meeting. So even though I was a director, I was, at the table with a bunch of other VPs and a bunch of folks who had sort of been there, done that, and I learned a lot from them. He also brought me to board meetings, and so in the beginning, it was very terrifying for me to be at the board meetings, but the more that he brought me, the more comfortable I got. And he, as I mentioned, he gave me greater and greater responsibilities. He asked me to sort of lead up product, and I ended up replacing his co-founder as product. And even to this day, anytime I need a favor from him, or if I'm struggling with something, I call him up and he is there for me. So the lesson here for me is seek out this person. And if you don't know how to find this person, the best thing I would say that, if you're interviewing, for example, just ask your hiring manager, give me examples of how you've demonstrated that you've been able to pull others up, and see how they respond. You'll kind of quickly figure out if your future boss can actually be your executive sponsor. And so the other sort of lesson I have here is that this is probably true not just for your professional career, but also for your life partner too. So find somebody who's invested in your success. The success metric that I use here is that you'll be able to move up faster in your career and have more growth opportunities. So that's my success metric. Okay, so the next story that I wanted to share is about telling your CEO or sponsor what you want. So earlier in my career, I told my manager that I wanted to be a people manager. At Oodle, I was the director of content and now product. And I went on maternity leave. I came back and noticed that a couple of other people who were at the director level had gotten promoted to VP, but I had not yet gotten promoted to VP, even though I was already doing the role. And so it took me a lot of courage, but I finally drummed up that courage to sit down with my boss and CEO, Craig at the time. And I basically was like, hey, Craig, I feel like I've been doing this role for the last couple of years, but I would like a promotion to VP. And what was really interesting was that even though Craig was supportive of me this whole time, he stopped and paused and he's like, I hadn't thought about that. Let me put some thought into it, and I'll get back to you. A few weeks later, he talked to the board about it, and he ended up promoting me to VP. And it was a little bit surprising to me that this sponsor who had given me all these opportunities and was such a champion in my journey, hadn't thought of promoting me until I had asked him to. So that was, again, another reinforcing lesson of just sort of tell your CEO or sponsor what you want, and hopefully good things will happen. And I will tell you that also changed the trajectory of my career, in that after I got promoted to VP, all the executive recruiters started calling me, which they hadn't called me before for other VP opportunities. And so that sort of just that title change really opens up the door to other opportunities for you. Okay, my next lesson is leaders lead. So what does that mean? So I'll sort of share a story of another startup that I joined. It was Keaton Rowe. And by that point, I had already, this was my fourth fourth sort of VP of product role. And I ended up getting promoted to chief product officer because I ran not just product, but also design, analytics, product operations. About 6 months or a year into sort of that company, I realized that a bunch of other departments were kind of failing. They had more junior folks leading the departments, like such as customer success, customer service, and marketing. And so I ended up just like learning and getting involved and kind of doing the work. And so much so that I ended up like having additional functions put under me. And my CEO had told me that I was her most valuable executive because me being at the company allowed her to sort of free up some of her brain cells and her focus to lead other areas of the business that needed her, such as fundraising, investor relations, and strategy. So my lesson here is just like, if you're at a company, take the initiative. You know, you're the boss. You're leading the company. You don't have to ask for permission. If you see gaps, go ahead and and learn about like those functions, and if you have the opportunity, lead those functions, or at least get involved. It's really important, especially as you become a VP and a C-suite leader, to really understand not just how product works, but how the rest of the business works. So, how does sales work? How does marketing work? How does the product sort of tie into the financial model? You know, what is the business model of the company? So that's a very important lesson that I think I learned from like that transition of just being sort of the head of product to sort of the head of a company and leading lots of different functions. So the success metric here is like building your dream job and stretching yourself because you're more than just product. You have the opportunity to learn lots and lots and lots of other skills that will take you far in your career. Okay, and the next sort of story that I wanted to share with you is about sort of C-suite leadership and how that translates into company leadership. So if you'll remember, I was a venture capitalist when the Swimply founders had pitched to me and asked me to join the company. But I had told them that I actually was no longer interested in leading product because I didn't understand like why I would leave the world of VC to go back to sort of my former life as sort of VP of product, which I had done for 16 years, which I had kind of left to do something different. So I told them, okay, want to join the company, don't want to do a product role any longer. And so they asked me, okay, well, what do you want to do? And what I ended up doing was I ended up writing like a 6-page job description of of my dream role and the role that I wanted at the company. And if anybody is interested, I am happy to share with you that job description because even 2 years later, I look back at that job description. I was like, wow, I wrote down my dream job and I nailed that role. So would love to share if anybody's interested. Let me know. Reach out to me separately. But the dream job description was essentially a CEO role where I was leading operations, our supply efforts, our community efforts, and HR and people. Many of those roles I had never ever done before, including HR and people. My goal was to build this company into the best company to work for with the best people doing the best work of their careers. And I do feel like we achieved some level of success in that. But the lesson here to share with all of you is that I think C-suite leadership is about maybe managing more than one function, but also that you are no longer just leading the product. You really have to lead the company, right? You have to understand the business inside and out. You have to understand the financial model. You have to understand how all the different pieces, product, marketing, sales, customer service, tie into the financial model. You probably want to be spending a lot of time with your CFO if you don't yet understand it. You also need to build your executive presence because you'll be interfacing with not just founders and the CEO and the C-suite, but also with the board as well. I think one thing that leaders often forget about is about building their social capital, right? So you're now no longer just managing the product team, you're managing executives. You have to learn how to say no while preserving those relationships. And because you'll now be asked to be, part of the board, either as a board member, as a board observer, you'll be in the boardroom. And you'll want to build your credibility. So you not only want to know your function inside and out, but also understand where the company is going. Like, what's working within the company, what's not working, how is our strategy and our plan moving us closer to achieving the milestones needed to raise the next round of financing? You have to read the board dynamics. You have to know when to sort of speak up in that board meeting and when to like let your CEO lead. And you have to also learn how to be very, very good at storytelling. So, here's the mistakes that we made, here's what we learned, here's the plan to address it. And so storytelling becomes even more of an essential skill as a C-suite leader. So my success metric here was that sort of developing the feeling that like I could be ready for anything. So if you wanted my next opportunity to be like CEO or startup founder, that that I'm ready. Like I know that I can do it. And for a long time, I had doubts that I could do it, or I could become the CEO, or I could be a startup founder. But I no longer have those doubts. I haven't yet pursued it, but I no longer have those doubts. So that's my success metric. Okay, and then a few other lessons before we open it up to questions. You've probably heard this before. I think it's really important to build your personal board of directors. I listed sort of 8 folks who are part of my board of directors. I would say that like my extended board of directors is much broader than that. And it consists of some CEOs. You'll see sort of Deb there. Some of you might know Shukriya Mahesh or Tatiana. But it consists of C-suite leaders, executive coaches, other venture capitalists. But not only are they sort of folks who might be at the pinnacle of their career, but they're also my friends, and they're my trusted network, and they want to help me in my journey, and they're invested in my success. So it's really important, I think, to find those folks, to stay in touch with them regularly, like reach out once a quarter, and people feel invested in you if you're willing to be open and sort of sharing your struggles and your journey and what you're thinking through. They want to help. And so I try to make it a point to reach out at least once a quarter to my personal board of directors. There was even sort of this one time where I was struggling of whether I wanted to take this one CEO role. And I talked through it with a bunch of my board of directors, and they gave me some really, really good advice. So the success metric here is that they'll pick up the phone call when you call, and that they'll help coach you through making the best decision for you, wherever you are in your life, wherever you are in your career. Okay. So another sort of lesson that I've learned in my journey is building the habit of charisma. So I never thought that I had charisma until I heard this author, Olivia Fox Cabane, talk about, I think it was her book, The Charisma Myth. And she talked about how anyone can master the art and science of personal magnetism. And so charisma can actually be broken down into 3 elements, which is presence, power, or also known as confidence, and warmth, right? And if you really think about it, every person has the ability to develop presence, power, or confidence, and warmth. And so I really thought about that and sort of took that those lessons to heart, sort of. And now the way I think about every interaction is, how can I be present in the moment? How can I be a deep listener? How can I make somebody feel better about themselves, having, been in the room with me than they were maybe before the start of the room? And then I think after sort of understanding that, I was like, oh, wow, I actually either have charisma or I can develop charisma, because I can make somebody feel better about themselves and leave the room with me with a smile on their face. And the other sort of thing that I really, truly believe in is to give generously. So be helpful to anybody and everyone with no expectations of anything in return. So my success metric here is happiness, because I promise you, when you make somebody else's day, not only will they be happy, but you're going to also feel happy. So that's my success metric there. And a couple of last lessons. Okay. So these last 2 might be my favorite ones. So for those of you who might not know me, I am an avid poker player. I've played in tons of poker tournaments. I'm a cash game player. I've just loved the game of poker, and have played it for the last 20 some years. So a couple of these are sort of lessons from the poker table that I've carried on through life. So the first one is, if you don't like the game that you're in, it's okay to switch tables. A couple of stories here that I wanted to share. So when I was VP of product at a company called Stella & Dot, I at that time I had been doing product for a while, and I had a few different VP of product roles, and I was ready for something different. And I talked to I talked to my CEO about sort of, switching it up and doing something outside of product. She wasn't yet ready to give me other functions. And so after knowing that, I decided, you know what, I'm going to leave. I've already been here for 3.5 years. I'm going to leave. I'm going to figure out like what it is that I'm going to do next. And so I left without any job, any plan. And I just started having conversations with lots and lots of people. And it was at that time that I reconnected with my old boss, Shripriya Mahesh, who had just joined a venture capital firm. And she invited me to come join her in this journey. And I became a entrepreneur in residence, or an executive in residence, and then I became an operating partner, and then I became an investing partner. And so conviction that I wanted to do something different and I wasn't given the opportunity led me to like switch my career. And it was a really fun and rewarding experience being in venture capital. And then more recently, and I wanted to sort of share a personal story without getting so much into the details, I left Swimply after 2 years. It was a career highlight. I loved my role. I loved what I was building. But the reason why I felt like it was time for me to leave was mission and values alignment with my CEO. I don't want to say anything more than that, but I was just like, okay, even though this is my company and I built it from the ground up and I loved it so much, it felt like it was time for me to leave. And change can be scary, and I left and I don't really have a plan. I'm currently in sabbatical, but I feel like it was the right decision for me, and that I am doing the right thing. The lesson here is that change can be scary, but sometimes things will emerge on the other side. That's even more rewarding, and you have to believe in yourself beyond reason, even if people around you might not share that belief, and know that you will discover yourself in the process and you will play the best game of your life. So the success metric here was the feeling that I'm in charge and I'm winning and I'm going to achieve personal and professional success and happiness no matter what. Okay, and then my last lesson before we open it up to questions is that it's okay to go all in on yourself. So I left my last company in October. I'm currently on sabbatical. I'm sort of doing a bunch of things which bring me sort of joy. And my sabbatical themes are joy, discovery, and connection. So for me, the last few months and however long my sabbatical lasts, it's all about connecting with people. It's all about joyful experiences, and it's discovery and finding new experiences. So I've done Reiki, I've done meditation, I've hired a personal trainer. These are all things I had never done before. I've been traveling. I've been having coffee with like 3 to 5 folks a day just to like reconnect and just sort of fill me with joy. And so it's been awesome. And the one thing that I've come to realize, especially whatever journey I take next, is that I want to work with mission and values aligned folks that I adore. And that's really my only plan is like, figure out the people that I love and mission values align and work with them. And so that's kind of my fuzzy plan. And the lesson here is that it's okay to prioritize you. So figure out what grounds you, figure out what brings you joy, and live and pursue your life with zest. So the success metric, I would say, is inner peace, happiness, and strength. So with that, I am going to stop the screen share and open it up for questions.
Wow, thank you, Ha. That was so inspiring to hear all of your stories. I feel inspired to go do something cool now. So everyone, let us know in the chat what questions you have. I will start with a few questions that I had during this talk. So the first lesson you said was finding your voice. One lesson that I heard from that was always share an opinion even when not asked. I loved that quote from you. How do you kind of get started on that? So I know a lot of people feel like very introverted, like you mentioned, and they are afraid to say something. Maybe they don't have something to say. What would you recommend for someone getting started on trying to share their opinion more?
Yeah, it's a really, really great question. So, and I alluded to this in my talk, is that, first of all, it's hard to have an opinion without sort of being informed, right? And so, like, especially early in my career, I went out and I talked to as many customers, eBay sellers and eBay buyers as I could, just to like understand their needs and their pain points, and even just be able to have stories that I could share, like in a meeting with folks. So it's really important to just sort of like be armed with the data. And of course, like I looked at all of our metrics. I knew them cold. I knew them inside and out. So when you prepare yourself and you're informed, you will be ready. The other thing is that, like, especially early in your career, is that maybe practice, like, practice with a friend, practice before you get into that sort of really important meeting with executives. There is nothing better than like rehearsing, practicing, and then just the more, it's a muscle. Like, so the more that you do it, the more you'll like get better at it and become more confident and become a little bit less introverted, at least in the meeting, right? And so it's a habit. You have to just get started. I have an amazing communications coach that I've worked with in the past. I wish I would have worked with her earlier in my career, but her name is Lauren Weinstein. So if anybody wants to chat with her, she's an amazing communications coach. And again, like I only started working with her as I was starting to do more talks, but I wish I would have like hired her earlier in my career. I still get tripped up with by the uhs and the ums, and we're all a work in progress. But like for finding folks who are experts at what they do, who can help you work in the area that you want to improve upon, I think is always a good thing.
Yeah, I love that. So be armed with data, work on your communications, and practice. Okay, so I see one question in the chat. What advice do you have about finding an authentic way to building your personal brand outside of your current company?
Yeah. Okay. So figure out what you enjoy doing and pursue that with passion. So one of the things that I realized about myself is I kind of hate writing. And so while I did it in VC, it's so intimidating. But what I do like is I love speaking. So I don't know. So that's why I'm always like, so Rowan, do you want to host me for something? Because I really, I have an idea for a talk that I want to give and I'd love to give it. And she's like, okay, sure. But that's kind of who I am, right? And so in terms of building personal brand, like I do think if you want to build a personal brand, you want to get yourself out there and just kind of figure out what you like doing, what you don't like doing. I would like to start writing more, but I'm not, great at it. I have in the past had a writing coach. Her name is Ellen Rhymes. So if you need her name, let me know. And I might hire her again to help me with my writing. But in the meantime, like, what I feel like I like, brings me joy, et cetera, is doing these talks. And so now I have a library of like 12 talks that I like to give. And this is a brand new one. I've never given this one before. So actually at the end, I'm going to throw up a survey link for everybody to fill out because I'd love to get some feedback on the talk too.
Awesome. Number 2, your lesson was tell your manager what you want. So I had a question there as well, was you mentioned that you built eBay's first career path document, which is super cool. But again, that was not in your job description, right? Like that's not a product manager's role. So, and yet you took it on, which is kind of what led you to taking on even more. And that you did kind of throughout your career. Like you mentioned several times, picking up things that weren't yours. And I think that's part of what makes you so great at all these things, because you're willing to do that. But how do you take it on when you feel like it's already so much? Like I know a lot of people struggle with, I can barely stay afloat with my current job. How could I possibly take on a new function, a new team, a new role that I've never even HR people, like all of these things. So do you have any tips there?
Okay, well, I will say that, and I don't know that this is healthy, but I have always been a little bit of a workaholic. And it's just been in my nature. I think growing up poor, refugee, immigrant, I think my mom worked like multiple jobs, and we were talking right before the talk of like how like earlier on, like as a 12-year-old, I was like working in restaurants. I was like working in nail salon stores. I was working picking cherries in orchards. So there was a little bit of the workaholic ingrained in me. Like as many of you might know Deb Lou, she's kind of the same way. So there is a little bit of that, like, like especially early in your career, don't be afraid to work your ass off. And then as you sort of progress in your career, and as you start to build a family, and as you start to have like other things piled on, then it ends up becoming about prioritization, right? It's like you can do everything, but you might not want to. And what is the highest and best use of your time, and really figure that out. And so, so it's that sort of juggle. But I would say early in your career, like you just have to do the work. Like there's no shortcuts for doing the work. So. Okay, hold on. Before you ask the next question, because I feel like I'm not going to be able to remember to screen share. So keep asking away, but I do want everybody, while I'm answering additional questions, to be able to fill out the Net Promoter Score survey. So if you can take your camera out and point to the QR code, it's going to ask you three simple questions. The NPS question, which is, would you recommend my talk to a friend or colleague? What did you like best, and what could be better? Because I really need that feedback, because I'm going to hopefully give this talk a couple more times. It's the first time I'm giving it, so I'd love the feedback. The other option is to go to this URL, bit.ly/whip mentoring. Am I screen sharing?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'll keep this up while folks fill out the survey, and then go ahead and keep asking questions.
Okay. Awesome. Well, we have one from Smriti, which is exactly my next one from number 3, which is I've got your back. You mentioned as a first-time manager that you had a lot of imposter syndrome. So do you have any tips there, and how did you get over it?
Yeah. Okay. I have imposter syndrome, not only then, but like even to this day. I think we all do.
Yeah.
Everybody here can like look at, say, my career and is like, oh my gosh, she's done all these things, and she really seems to have figured it out. We all have imposter syndrome. Like there was a period of time where I'm like, I can't do this job. I don't know how to do this job. I've never done it before, and then you just have to like learn to power through it. It's like, you have to believe in yourself, knowing that like, I'm smart enough. If I don't know it, I will figure it out. I'm going to put in the work. If I need help, I'm not going to be afraid to like reach out to my sponsors or my friends or my board of directors to get the feedback and, to help me improve. And so that's kind of how you have to power through life, is just knowing that everything is new for everybody, right? So anytime you take on something new, somebody else had to have taken it on as well, new and fresh. And the folks that I think get far are the ones who are able to sort of power through that imposter syndrome, put in the work, get the coaching, and just have this confidence and the belief in themselves that, that I'll figure it out. And you'll make some mistakes along the way. That's fine, but just power through it. So.
Yeah. Love that. All right. We are running out of time. I want to make sure we have time for networking so that you all can meet each other, but I want to get 1 or 2 more questions in. So Mace has a question about charisma. How do you work on charisma?
Okay. So there is a talk on YouTube, and the person is Olivia Fox Cabane, Cabane. Watch it. She basically gives a talk on her book, The Charisma Myth, and she shares lessons, and that was what inspired me. So I think she's better at explaining it than I am. But again, it sort of breaks down into being present. So like anytime you're in a room with somebody else, like be a great listener and be genuinely interested in what they have to say, and like lean in and ask questions, and help them sort of think about things that they might be struggling with in a different way. So being an active listener and being present, I think, is the first criteria. The second criteria is sort of, she calls it power, but I'm renaming it confidence, right? So like you have to learn how to not have that imposter syndrome in a meeting with somebody, no matter who they are, like whether they're higher level than you or maybe reporting into you, like just sort of have that confidence that you belong and you can be helpful, and and that you're confident, and that shows through. And then the third sort of element of charisma is warmth, right? And so just sort of, having a smile and, making somebody feel great about themselves. Those 3 elements, like if you look at any charismatic person that you think might be charismatic, they have those 3 elements, and you can build that muscle just by remembering those 3 things every single time you're in a meeting.
Love that. Thank you, Ariana. Drop the YouTube video and the book into the
thank you,
chat.
Ariana.
So
Yay.
she's all over that. It looks like we have 2 more questions, and maybe we can get to those real quick. One is, any other books you recommend that helped you? So do you want to maybe that's a LinkedIn post for the future?
I would say my favorite book right now, and I highly recommend it, especially if you are looking to be a great manager and a great leader, is the book Leading with Heart by John Baird. So he's an executive coach, like he's like a coach to the CEO stars like all around Silicon Valley. It is the best book I've ever read on people first leadership. And that's kind of, something that I really believe in, which is you can solve organizational problems through a people first lens. And you can learn how to be an amazing leader and an amazing manager by putting people first. Highly recommend the book. Everybody needs to get it. And then, of course, all of these authors probably have podcasts that they do or YouTube talks. And so that's the other hack if you don't have time to read 20 chapters, but it's an amazing book if you do have the time.
Thanks, Ariana, for that link. And last question let's do is from Alicia, is for many of us, companies don't invest in our development. What do you recommend for those in that situation?
Oh, gosh. That's a really good question. I mean, first of all, I would have that conversation with your manager first, right? Like, even if the company doesn't sort of sponsor anything, and let them know, like, and be very, very specific. Like, hey, here is the course that I want to take, or here is the conference I want to go to. Here's, why I want to go to it. Here's how I think I can not only contribute to my development, but also help me become better at my job and achieve the company outcomes, right? So you got to make it the business case. Your manager, if they're a good manager, will figure out the budget. Like, we'll do the right thing and figure out the budget. So you have to ask. Don't be afraid of asking, even if it's not a company policy.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with that. Or coaching. You need it. Make a case for yourself.
I know Jenny is an amazing coach. So I know everybody wants to also get to know Jenny because she's awesome. I'm going to stop the screen share here.
Thanks. I know I want to leave time for you guys to all meet each other. So Ha, will you have time to hop in networking as well?
I would love to. Love to stay.
Okay, so I will as well. So we'll maybe see some of you in the networking. Go ahead and go into the networking tab on the left and get paired up randomly with someone and enjoy your chats. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Jenny. Thanks everybody.